At 70 years old, I believed surprises were behind me. Life had already handed me widowhood, loneliness, and the slow ache of aging bones. What I did not expect was betrayal. Quiet, calculated, and wearing the faces I trusted most. My name is Margaret Hale, and until one ordinary Tuesday morning, I thought my family was all I had left. The day began like any other. My son Daniel insisted on driving me to my annual checkup, but I declined. Independence was one of the few things I still guarded fiercely. The clinic smelled faintly of disinfectant and old magazines. I had been coming here for decades, long enough that the nurses greeted me by name. Dr. Andrew Collins had been my physician for years. He'd watched me grieve my husband, helped me manage my blood pressure, and reassured me every time I worried that age itself was an illness. That morning, however, something about him felt wrong. His smile was tight. His hands shook slightly as he wrapped the cuff around my arm. "Well," I asked gently, "am I falling apart yet?" He forced a chuckle. "Quite the opposite, Margaret. Your heart is strong, your tests are excellent, you're healthier than many people 20 years younger." Relief washed over me. I gathered my purse and stood, ready to go home. That's when he leaned closer. Too close. As I turned away, I felt a subtle weight drop into my bag, a folded slip of paper. Dr. Collins cleared his throat. "Take care of yourself," he said, eyes finally meeting mine. And be cautious. Not everyone who smiles at you means well. I left the office unsettled. I didn't open the note right away. Part of me didn't want to. Fear has a way of announcing itself before it arrives. At home, the atmosphere was oddly tense. Daniel sat stiffly on the couch. His wife Karen clutched a folder she slid under a cushion when she noticed me. My granddaughter Lily barely looked up from her phone. "How did the appointment go?" Daniel asked. "Perfect health," I replied. The silence that followed was deafening. Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. Lily rolled her eyes. Daniel nodded too quickly. "That's great," he said. His voice lacked warmth. Dinner that night felt staged. Conversation was shallow. Plates clinked too loudly. Every glance felt rehearsed. I excused myself early, my chest tight with a feeling I couldn't name. Alone in my bedroom, I finally reached into my purse. The note was brief, precise, devastating. "Margaret, your son and daughter-in-law visited me yesterday. They asked about your mental fitness. They wanted documentation stating you require institutional care. They asked about your assets. You are not ill. Do not return home. Protect yourself." The room spun. My hands trembled as memories replayed in reverse. Whispered conversations, sudden interest in my finances, Karen helping organize my paperwork. It all snapped into place like a cruel puzzle. At 2 a.m, I heard voices drifting from the kitchen. I stepped into the hallway, heart pounding, just as Daniel said the words that shattered whatever hope I had left. "She's fine for now, but we'll fix that." And in that moment, I understood something terrifying. The note hadn't been a warning. It had been a countdown. I pressed myself against the wall, listening as my own family discussed how to erase me and what they planned to do once I was gone. I stood frozen in the hallway, barefoot on the cold floor. My heartbeat pounding so loudly I was certain they could hear it. The kitchen light glowed faintly at the end of the corridor, shadows stretching along the walls like long fingers reaching for me. Daniel's voice came first, low, controlled, terrifyingly calm. "We just need a doctor who'll cooperate," he said. Collins was stubborn, but he's not the only one. Karen let out a sharp laugh. "Plenty of doctors sign paperwork without asking too many questions, especially when there's money involved." Money. The word sliced through me. "And what if she refuses?" Lily asked. My granddaughter, the child I'd rocked to sleep, taught to read, defended at every school meeting. Her voice held impatience, not concern. "She's more stubborn than you think," Daniel sighed. "Then we make things uncomfortable, confuse her, stress her out. It won't take much at her age." Karen leaned forward. "We can start small, move her things, tell her she misplaced them, adjust her pills, just enough to make her foggy." I clutched the wall to stay upright. "You can't be serious," Lily said, but there was no outrage in her tone, only hesitation. "That sounds extreme." Karen scoffed. "Extreme is waiting another 10 years for her to die naturally. The house alone is worth a fortune, add her pensions, savings." "And once she's declared incompetent," Daniel interrupted, "everything becomes manageable. Guardianship, power of attorney, no more obstacles." Obstacle. That was me. My stomach twisted as memory surfaced. Daniel insisting on managing my bills to help. Karen asking where I kept my jewelry. Lily complaining that I was always around. I had mistaken tolerance for love. "She doesn't have anyone else," Karen continued. "No close friends, no siblings. Who's going to believe her if she claims we're mistreating her?" Daniel chuckled softly. "Exactly. To the outside world, we're saints, a devoted family caring for an aging mother." They laughed. Something inside me cracked. Not loudly, but completely. The love I had poured into this family for decades drained away, replaced by a cold, focused clarity. I backed away silently and locked myself in my room. Sleep never came. By dawn, my fear had transformed into resolve. They thought I was helpless. They thought I had nothing. They were wrong. They didn't know about the accounts my late husband had left me, the investments I'd kept quiet to ensure Daniel grew up independent, not entitled. They didn't know I had options, resources, time. And they didn't know I had heard everything. At first light, I packed with deliberate calm. Documents, medication, a small notebook containing numbers I'd memorized long ago. Before leaving, I did one more thing. I turned on my phone's voice recorder. Then I walked past Daniel and Karen's bedroom. Their door was cracked open. "Today we start calling lawyers. If she acts strange, it'll help our case." Karen hummed approvingly. "I'll photocopy her cards. Small withdrawals at first. She won't notice." Perfect. I recorded every word. I left a simple note on the kitchen table. "Gone out for the day. Back later." They wouldn't suspect a thing. After all, what could an old woman do? As the front door clicked shut behind me, I didn't feel fear anymore. I felt awake. I stepped into the morning air knowing one thing for certain. This wasn't an escape. It was the opening move of a war they never saw coming. The city looked different when I arrived that morning. Sharper, louder, alive with possibility. I hadn't walked its streets alone in years. Somewhere along the way, my life had shrunk to a routine of meals, chores, and silent compliance. But now, every step felt like reclaiming stolen ground. My first stop was the bank. The young teller glanced up as I approached, her smile polite but curious. I asked to withdraw cash, enough to buy myself time. When she hesitated, I met her gaze steadily. "I'm perfectly aware of what I'm doing," I said. She nodded and processed the request without further questions. As I slid the envelope into my purse, I felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Control. Next, I checked into a hotel across town. Discreet, upscale, the kind of place where no one asked unnecessary questions. The receptionist welcomed me warmly, unaware that she was witnessing the quiet rebirth of a woman everyone else had written off. In my room, I locked the door, sat on the edge of the bed, and finally let myself cry. Not loud sobs, just slow, exhausted tears. I mourned the years I had given freely, the birthdays I planned, the sacrifices I never counted. The love I believed was mutual. When the tears dried, something else took their place. Focus. I made calls, careful ones. I contacted my late husband's financial advisor, a man who had respected my privacy for decades. When I explained that I needed access to everything, immediately, his voice sharpened with concern. "Are you safe?" he asked. "For now," I replied, "but I won't be if I hesitate." By midday, my phone buzzed constantly. Daniel, Karen, Lily. I ignored them all. Finally, I answered one call, Daniel's. "Mom, where are you?" he demanded, irritation leaking through his forced concern. "You didn't come home." "I took a day for myself," I said calmly. "That's not like you," he snapped. "You should have told us." I smiled to myself. The shift in power was already unsettling him. "I'm 70, I replied. "I don't need permission." There was a pause, then softer. "Are you feeling okay? You sound different." There it was, the beginning of their narrative. "I've never felt clearer," I said, and ended the call. That afternoon, I met with an attorney recommended by my advisor. His office was quiet, his demeanor sharp. I played him the recordings without commentary. He didn't interrupt. When the last voice faded, he leaned back slowly. "What they're planning constitutes elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy," he said. "And you have evidence. I don't want mercy. I want protection and consequences." His lips curved into a thin smile. "Then we'll proceed strategically." By evening, I sat alone in the hotel restaurant, dressed better than I had in years. A waiter complimented my scarf. I thanked him, surprised by how good it felt to be seen. That's when my phone lit up again. A text from Karen. "We're worried. Please come home. This isn't healthy." Unhealthy. I laughed softly. They thought I was spiraling, that I'd panic, return, apologize. Instead, I ordered dessert. Back in my room, I reviewed the recordings once more, labeling each file carefully. Evidence was power. It was insurance. Before bed, I sent a single message to Daniel. "I know what you're doing. I suggest you stop." The reply came instantly. "Mom, you're confused." I stared at the screen, calm and certain. "No," I whispered. "I'm finally awake." As I turned off the lights, I knew tomorrow would force my family to choose: retreat quietly or reveal just how far they were willing to go to destroy me. I woke before dawn, not from fear, but from anticipation. For decades, my mornings had begun with obligation. Breakfast to prepare, medications to sort, small acts of service no one noticed. That morning, I woke with a plan, and for the first time in years, every hour belonged to me. My phone had dozens of missed calls. Daniel had tried reason, Karen had tried guilt, Lily had tried silence, which hurt more than the others combined. I didn't respond. Instead, I met my lawyer, Mr. Harris, in his office overlooking the river. He was meticulous, the kind of man who listened more than he spoke. After reviewing my financial records and the recordings, he nodded gravely. "They'll escalate," he said. "People who believe they're entitled don't back down easily." "What should I expect?" I asked. "Petitions for guardianship, claims that you're unstable, possibly attempts to access your accounts." I smiled thinly. "Let them try." By noon, it happened. The bank called. "Mrs. Hale," the manager said carefully, "your son came in this morning requesting control over your finances. He claimed you were experiencing cognitive decline." I felt no shock, only validation. "Did you grant it?" I asked. "Of course not," he replied, "but I wanted to inform you." "Thank you," I said. "Please flag all accounts, no changes without my written authorization." I hung up and exhaled slowly. They were moving faster than I'd expected. An hour later, my phone rang again, this time from an unknown number. "Mom," Daniel said when I answered. His voice was strained, brittle. "We need to talk. This isn't funny anymore." "Funny?" I echoed. "You're right, it never was. You disappeared. You're making decisions without us. The bank says you locked us out." "That's because you tried to take what wasn't yours." Silence. Then Karen's voice cut in, sharp and trembling. "You're being paranoid. We were trying to help you." "By calling me mentally unfit?" I asked. "By planning to control my assets?" "Oh, I understand perfectly." Karen's breath hitched. Daniel took over again. "Mom, we're scaring us. This behavior, it's erratic. We're worried you might need professional evaluation." There it was, the word they'd been waiting to use. "Evaluation," I repeated calmly. "By which doctor?" Neither answered. You see, a sane woman protects herself when she learns her family is plotting against her. An unstable one pretends nothing is wrong. Karen exploded. "You're tearing this family apart." "No," I replied. "I'm exposing it." I ended the call and sat back, hands steady. That afternoon, my investigator called. "They've started selling your belongings," he said. "Furniture listings online, jewelry inquiries at a pawn shop." My chest tightened, but I didn't cry. "Document everything," I instructed. "Already done." By evening, desperation replaced subtlety. Lily finally messaged me. "Grandma, please. Dad says you're sick. People are talking." "People." I typed slowly. If people are talking, it's because the truth is louder than lies. Minutes later, Daniel sent a final message. "If you don't come home, we'll be forced to take legal action to protect you." I read it twice. Then I forwarded it to my lawyer. I wasn't their mother anymore. I was their problem, and they had no idea how unprepared they were for what came next. That night, as my lawyer drafted protective orders, I learned my family had made one fatal mistake. They believed I would break before I fought back. By the 5th day, the tone of the messages changed. Concern vanished. Patience evaporated. What replaced it was urgency, sharp, reckless, and revealing. My lawyer called early that morning. "They've filed a petition," Mr. Harris said. "Emergency guardianship. They're claiming you're a danger to yourself." I closed my eyes, absorbing the words. "How soon?" I asked. "A hearing has been requested within 72 hours. So this was it, the move they'd been preparing for all along. "They're pushing because you're not cooperating," he continued. "That tells me they're scared." "Good. What do we do?" I asked. "We let them talk," he replied, "and we document every lie." That afternoon, I received a call from a woman who introduced herself as a court-appointed social worker. Her voice was pleasant, overly gentle. "Mrs. Hale, your family is worried about you," she said. "They claim you've been acting confused and impulsive." "Is that what they told you?" I asked. "Yes," she replied carefully. "They mentioned sudden disappearances, large cash withdrawals, erratic decisions." I smiled. "Then you should come see me," I said. "I'd love to meet." We scheduled the visit for the next morning. When I hung up, my investigator sent me something else. Screenshots of emails Karen had sent to a private care facility. She was asking about availability, costs, long-term placement. They weren't waiting for the court. They were already planning my disappearance. That night, Daniel left a voicemail. "Mom, please," he said, voice cracking, but not with sadness, with frustration. "You're forcing our hand. This could get ugly." Ugly. I saved the message. The next morning, I dressed carefully. Pressed slacks, pearl earrings, light makeup. Not to impress, but to contradict the image they were selling. The social worker arrived right on time. She scanned the room subtly, taking notes with her eyes. "You live here alone?" she asked. "For now," I said. "I'm between homes." "And your family?" I tried to have me declared incompetent without my consent, I replied evenly. Her pen paused. I handed her a folder. Inside were bank statements, the recordings, transcripts, and printed messages. Evidence stacked neatly. Calm, undeniable. Her expression shifted page by page. "This is serious," she said quietly. "Yes," I replied, "it is." When she left, she didn't promise anything, but she didn't look convinced, and my family either. An hour later, my phone rang. Karen. "You think you're clever," she hissed, "running around, poisoning people against us." "I'm telling the truth. If that poisons anything, that's not my fault." "You don't get it," she snapped. "Once the court decides, you won't have a choice." "You're right," I said softly. "Once the court decides, someone won't have a choice." She hung up. That evening, Mr. Harris called again. "We found something," he said. "They contacted a doctor known for signing questionable evaluations. He's under investigation." I exhaled slowly. "They're getting sloppy," I said. "Yes," he agreed, "and desperation makes people careless." I stood by the window watching the city lights flicker on one by one. They thought this was about control. They thought I was afraid. But what they didn't understand, what they had never understood, was that I had already lost everything that mattered to them, which meant I had nothing left to protect but the truth. And the truth was about to walk into a courtroom. As the guardianship hearing loomed closer, I realized my family wasn't preparing to win. They were preparing to erase me entirely. The courthouse smelled like old paper and polished wood, serious, intimidating, designed to make people feel small. I arrived early, flanked by Mr. Harris, my spine straight and my steps steady. If my family expected me to shuffle in, confused and frightened, they were about to be disappointed. Daniel, Karen, and Lily were already there. They sat together, whispering urgently. Karen wore an expression of practiced concern, dabbing her eyes with a tissue as if on cue. Daniel avoided my gaze entirely. Lily looked pale, her jaw tight, eyes darting nervously around the room. A performance. When the judge entered, the room settled into silence. The guardianship hearing began swiftly. Karen's attorney spoke first, painting a tragic picture of a devoted family trying to protect a declining matriarch. "Mrs. Hale has been withdrawing large sums of money," he said. "She left her home without notice, cut off contact, and has become increasingly paranoid, claiming her family is plotting against her." Paranoid. The word echoed in my mind, but I didn't flinch. Then it was my lawyer's turn. "Your Honor," Mr. Harris began calmly, "this case is not about confusion. It is about control." He presented the recordings. The courtroom filled with my son's voice, cold, calculating. "We'll make her uncomfortable, confuse her, adjust her medication." Karen's face drained of color. Mr. Harris followed with bank records, messages, and emails, each piece tightening the noose. "Mrs. Hale did not disappear," Mr. Harris continued. "She protected herself, and she did so after discovering a coordinated plan to strip her of autonomy and assets." The judge leaned forward, brows furrowed. Daniel's lawyer scrambled. "These recordings could be misinterpreted, taken out of context." "Then let's add context," Mr. Harris replied. He submitted the voicemail Daniel had left me, threatening legal action if I didn't comply. Then the social worker testified. "In my professional opinion," she said carefully, "Mrs. Hale is mentally competent, clear, organized, and fully aware of her circumstances." Karen shook her head violently. "This is absurd," she cried. "She's manipulating everyone." The judge raised a hand. "Enough." He turned to me. "Mrs. Hale, do you wish to say anything?" I stood. I raised my son to be independent. I trusted my family, and when I learned they were preparing to take my freedom, I did the only sane thing. I left. I looked directly at Daniel. I am not confused. I am betrayed. The judge didn't hesitate long. The petition for emergency guardianship is denied. Furthermore, I am referring this matter for investigation into possible elder abuse and financial misconduct. Karen gasped. Daniel's face crumpled. Lily began to cry. Outside the courtroom, reporters waited. Cameras flashed. Karen grabbed my arm, nails digging into my skin. "You think this is over?" she hissed. "You've humiliated us." I gently removed her hand. "No," I said. "I've protected myself." Mr. Harris leaned in as we walked away. "They won't stop, but now they're exposed." I nodded. That night, alone in my hotel room, I replayed the day again and again. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt resolved. Because if they were willing to lie in court, what else were they willing to do? As the judge's words echoed in my mind, one chilling thought surfaced. They had failed publicly, and desperate people rarely retreat quietly. Victory has a strange aftertaste. The court had ruled in my favor. The guardianship petition was denied. Any reasonable person would have stepped back, regrouped, maybe even felt shame. But reason had never guided my family. Entitlement had. That night, I learned what desperation sounds like. It started with the calls. Daniel left 7 voicemails in under an hour. His voice shifted with each one. Anger, pleading, indignation, panic. "Mom, this has gone too far. Please call me back. You're destroying everything." Karen followed with texts that bounced wildly between apology and accusation. "We were only trying to help. You've always been dramatic. You owe us an explanation." And Lily sent nothing. That silence worried me more than the noise. The next morning, my investigator called early. "They've emptied the house," he said. "Anything of value, art, antiques, your late husband's watch, is gone." My chest tightened. "And the jewelry?" I asked. "Sold, pawned, traded. We're tracing it now." I closed my eyes slowly. Those weren't just objects, they were memories, proof that my life before betrayal had existed. "They're also spreading a story," he continued, "telling neighbors you've had a breakdown, that you're being manipulated by lawyers." I laughed bitterly. Of course they are. By noon, the harassment escalated. An unfamiliar car idled outside my hotel. The receptionist called to warn me. "3 people are asking for your room number," she whispered. "They seem agitated." I didn't need to ask who. I stayed inside. Minutes later, my phone rang again. "Daniel." "This ends now," he said, his voice low and sharp. "Come home. We can fix this quietly." "There is no home. Not with you in it." "You're making a huge mistake," he snapped. "Without us, you're nothing." "Nothing." I smiled faintly. "That's funny. I've never felt more like myself." He hung up. An hour later, Mr. Harris called. "They tried to file again," he said, "this time alleging you're being financially exploited by me." I sighed. "And?" he said. "It was dismissed immediately, but this confirms it. They're flailing." Flailing people do dangerous things. That evening, I finally heard from Lily. "Grandma, can we talk? Alone?" I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "Public place. Daytime." She agreed. We met the next afternoon at a cafe across from the hotel. Lily looked different. No makeup, dark circles under her eyes, hands trembling as she stirred her coffee. "They're blaming you," she said quietly, "for everything. Dad says you ruined his life." "And what do you think?" I asked gently. She swallowed. I think they're scared." "So are you." She nodded. "They're planning something," she whispered. "I don't know what, but they keep saying you've gone too far." My pulse quickened. Did they say how they plan to stop me? She shook her head. Only that if the courts won't listen, they'll handle it another way. Another way? I reached across the table and covered her hand. Lily, listen to me carefully. Whatever they ask you to do, whatever they say, I need you to tell me. Tears welled in her eyes. I don't want to be part of this anymore. Then don't be, I said softly. But understand something. This is no longer just a family dispute. It's a matter of safety. When she left, my resolve hardened into something sharper. They weren't retreating. They were regrouping, and whatever they were planning next wouldn't involve paperwork. As I returned to my room that night, I realized the fight had crossed a line. My family was no longer trying to control me. They were trying to silence me. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid, but because instinct told me something irreversible was coming. When people lose legal ground, they look for moral shortcuts. When those fail, they invent lies so large, they hope the truth will suffocate beneath them. By morning, I knew exactly what my family's next move would be. And they didn't disappoint. Mr. Harris called just after 8. "They've gone public," he said grimly. "Karen contacted a local journalist last night." I closed my eyes. What story are they selling? That you're suffering from advanced dementia and have been financially exploited by outsiders. That your disappearance is evidence of cognitive decline. I let out a slow breath. So now I'm a headline. "Yes," he said, "but they made a mistake." "I always do," I replied. By noon, the article was everywhere. My name, my face, a photo taken years ago, cropped poorly to make me look frail. The words, "confused elderly woman," jumped out like a slap. Karen was quoted extensively. "We're heartbroken," she said. "We just want what's best for her." Daniel added, "She's been manipulated into turning against her own family." Lily's name was absent. That omission told me everything. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I prepared. By afternoon, my investigator sent me something priceless. Emails Karen had exchanged with the journalist, early drafts, revisions. One line stood out like a loaded gun. "If we don't act fast, she'll drain everything and leave us with nothing." Not concern. Fear. Greed. I forwarded everything to Mr. Harris. "Are you ready to respond?" he asked. "No," I said calmly. "I'm ready to speak." That evening, I did something I'd never done in my life. I went live. The platform was simple. My lawyer handled the technical side. When the camera turned on, I looked directly into it. No script, no trimmer. "My name is Margaret Hale," I said. "I'm 70 years old, mentally sound, and very aware of what my family is doing." The comments began instantly. I told them everything. The note from my doctor, the recordings, the guardianship attempt, the lies in the article. I held up documents, played audio, showed receipts. "This is not confusion," I said steadily. "This is self-defense." Viewers flooded in, hundreds, then thousands. "Protect Grandma. This is elder abuse. She's sharper than all of them combined." Midway through, my phone rang. Lily. I put her on speaker. "Grandma," she whispered, voice shaking. "Dad is furious. Mom is screaming. They're saying you've ruined them." "Good," I replied calmly. "Then maybe they'll stop." "You don't understand. They're talking about blaming me." The chat exploded. "What? They're throwing the granddaughter under the bus?" Lily's breath hitched. "They said if this goes to trial, they'll say I stole from you, that I manipulated you." My heart clenched, but my voice stayed firm. "Lily, listen to me. You are not alone, and you're not to blame." She began to cry. "Stay with me," I told her. "Say nothing else to them. We'll handle this the right way." I ended the call and turned back to the camera. "When lies collapse," I said quietly, "they look for scapegoats." The stream ended with over 10,000 viewers. My phone buzzed nonstop. Support, lawyers, strangers sharing their own stories, and one final message from Daniel. "Turn this off now." I stared at it, then powered down my phone completely. They had tried to destroy my credibility. Instead, they had handed me something far more dangerous: a voice. As the night settled in, I knew the lie they'd told the world was about to destroy them, and they were already choosing who would fall first. The morning after the live stream, the world felt louder. My phone, once I turned it back on, was flooded with messages. Support poured in from strangers, advocacy groups, journalists, and even medical professionals who specialized in elder care. The story had shifted overnight. I was no longer the confused elderly woman. I was the woman who fought back. But empowerment has a cost. Mr. Harris called before I could finish my coffee. "They're panicking," he said, "and panic makes people reckless." "What did they do now?" I asked. "They retained a criminal defense attorney." That single sentence chilled me. "Why criminal?" I asked. "Because they've realized this isn't just civil anymore," he replied. "They're preparing for charges." I stared out the hotel window, watching traffic crawl below. "And Lily?" "She contacted my office early this morning," he said gently. "She's scared, but she's willing to cooperate." That was my first real relief in days. By afternoon, the backlash against my family was fierce. The article that once painted me as fragile had been retracted. A follow-up piece quoted experts calling the situation textbook elder abuse. Karen's name was dragged through comment sections she could no longer control. And then came the knock. 2 police officers stood in the hotel lobby, asking for me by name. The receptionist called first, her voice tight. "They say it's not an arrest, just questions." I nodded. "I'll come down." The officers were respectful, professional. They explained that a welfare check had been requested, anonymous, of course. "I assume by my family," I said calmly. One officer nodded. "We just need to confirm you're here voluntarily and not under duress." "I'm not, but they are trying to make it look that way." I gave them Mr. Harris's card. They thanked me and left without incident. Still, the message was clear. They were trying to intimidate me into silence. That evening, Lily called again. "They're fighting," she whispered. "Really bad. Dad says Mom pushed this too far. Mom says Dad ruined everything." "And you?" I asked. "I packed a bag," she said softly. "I don't feel safe here anymore." My heart tightened. "Where are you now?" "At a friend's house," she replied. "But, Grandma, they're saying if this keeps going, no one wins." "They're wrong," I said. "The truth always wins. It just takes longer." She hesitated. "They also mentioned getting rid of evidence." That did it. "Lily," I said firmly, "listen to me. If you have anything, texts, recordings, emails, you save them, back them up, and do not confront them." "I already did," she whispered. "I recorded their fight last night." I closed my eyes, equal parts proud and terrified. "You did the right thing." That night, Mr. Harris and I met again. "This has crossed into criminal conspiracy," he said, "and we have more than enough to proceed." "Then proceed," I replied. "No more waiting." Outside, sirens wailed somewhere in the distance. For the first time, I understood something clearly. When you expose people who believe they're untouchable, they don't just lose control, they lose restraint. And restraint was the only thing keeping my family from doing something irreversible. As I lay awake in the dark, one thought echoed louder than fear. If they were already trying to erase evidence, how far would they go to erase me? The call came just after midnight. I was sitting upright in bed, lights on, fully dressed. Sleep had become a luxury I couldn't afford. When the phone rang, I answered before it could finish its first vibration. "Mrs. Hale," Mr. Harris said, his voice urgent. "Something just happened." My heart tightened. "Tell me." "Your family made a move tonight. A bad one." I closed my eyes. "What kind of move?" "They tried to destroy evidence," he said. "Karen went back to the house with a storage bin and started burning documents in the backyard." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "And," I finally managed, "and a neighbor called the fire department. Smoke, suspicious behavior. The police arrived." I sat perfectly still. "Were they arrested?" I asked. "Not yet," he replied, "but the officers confiscated what was left. And, this is important, Daniel tried to interfere." Interfere. Mr. Harris continued, "Daniel told the police the documents belonged to you, and that you were mentally unstable and didn't know what you were doing." Of course he did. "But here's where it fell apart," he said. "The officers already had your live stream bookmarked. One of them recognized your name." A slow, disbelieving laugh escaped me. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "people build their own cages." By morning, the situation had exploded. My investigator sent photos, charred folders, half-burned bank statements, fragments of contracts. Enough remained to identify what they'd tried to erase. Credit applications, draft wills, medical forms. Fake ones. By 9 a.m., Mr. Harris confirmed what I already felt in my bones. "The district attorney is opening a formal investigation," he said. "Conspiracy, fraud, attempted coercion." I leaned back against the headboard, shaking. "It's happening," I whispered. "Yes," he said, and Lily's recordings accelerated everything. She had sent them in overnight. Audio of Daniel shouting, Karen screaming about money, both of them arguing over who would take the blame if the police got involved. They hadn't realized Lily had stopped being silent. She had started listening. That afternoon, Lily arrived at the hotel with a single backpack. Her eyes were red, her shoulders tense, but when she saw me, she collapsed into my arms. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I didn't stop them sooner." I held her tightly. "You stopped them when it mattered." She pulled back, wiping her face. "They told me if I talked, they'd say I stole your jewelry, that I manipulated you." I nodded. "They already tried." Her voice trembled. "I don't want to live like this." "You won't," I said firmly. "Not anymore." That evening, the news broke. Local couple under investigation for alleged elder abuse and fraud. No names yet, but it wouldn't stay that way. My phone buzzed with one final message from Daniel. "You think you've won. You've ruined everything." I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. "You did that yourself." I blocked the number. Later that night, Lily and I sat in silence, the weight of everything settling between us. "Grandma," she asked softly, "what happens now?" I thought of the burned papers, the lies, the years I'd lost. "Now," I said, "the truth finishes what it started." Outside, police lights flashed faintly in the distance, red and blue cutting through the darkness. For the first time since this began, I felt something close to peace. Not relief, justice in motion. As sirens echoed somewhere beyond the city, I knew the next knock on the door wouldn't be for me, and when it came, my family would finally have nowhere left to hide. The knock came at 6:17 a.m. Sharp, authoritative, final. I knew instantly it wasn't meant for me. Lily was already awake, sitting upright on the couch, her phone clutched in both hands like a lifeline. When it buzzed, she flinched. "It's Dad," she whispered. "Don't answer," I said gently. She didn't. The phone kept vibrating until it went silent. Minutes later, Mr. Harris called. "They've been detained," he said simply. I closed my eyes, not in triumph, not in sorrow, but in acknowledgement. This chapter had reached its turning point. "Daniel and Karen were taken in for questioning early this morning," he continued. "Based on the evidence recovered last night and Lily's recordings, the district attorney moved quickly." "And Lily?" I asked. "She's considered a cooperating witness," he said, "which is why she's with you, and not them." Lily's shoulders sagged with relief. By mid-morning, the names were public. The headlines were careful, but unmistakable. Couple investigated for alleged elder abuse, fraud, and coercion. Neighbors were interviewed. Old photos resurfaced. A curated image unraveled in real time. Karen's sister went on record claiming she'd always suspected something was off. Daniel's former co-workers mentioned unexplained money problems. The narrative they'd built collapsed under the weight of facts. Lily watched the coverage silently. "I didn't think it would feel like this," she said. "Like what?" I asked. "Empty," she replied. "I thought I'd feel relieved or angry." "Sometimes," I said softly, "justice doesn't arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it just leaves quiet behind." That afternoon, investigators requested formal statements. Mr. Harris handled everything, ensuring Lily and I never sat in the same room as Daniel or Karen. I didn't want to see them. Not yet. That evening, I finally allowed myself to grieve, not for what I'd lost, but for what had never been real. The family I thought I had. The love I assumed was unconditional. Lily sat beside me, knees drawn up. "They were already blaming each other," she said quietly. "I know. That's how lies end. Alone." Her voice shook. "Dad kept saying you were doing this out of spite." I turned to her. "Do you believe that?" She met my eyes. "No. I believe you survived." The next day, formal charges were announced. Conspiracy to commit fraud, financial exploitation, attempted coercion, evidence tampering. Each word felt heavy but necessary. Mr. Harris called again that evening. "They want a plea deal," he said. "Your family, they're scared." I stared out the window, city lights flickering like distant stars. "What would that mean?" I asked. "Reduced sentences," he replied, "but full admission of guilt." I said nothing for a long moment. Then, "Tell them we'll talk." After the call ended, Lily looked at me, eyes wide. "Grandma, does that mean you'll forgive them?" I thought of the fire pit, the forged papers, the threats. "No," I said gently. "It means I'll let the truth speak without interruption." That night, as the city settled into uneasy calm, I realized something profound. This wasn't the end. It was the pause before the reckoning. As I prepared to face my family one final time, I understood that the hardest part of justice isn't winning, it's deciding what mercy, if any, looks like after betrayal. The meeting took place in a quiet conference room inside the courthouse. Neutral walls, no windows, no comfort. Just a long table. 3 chairs on one side, 2 on the other. Daniel and Karen were brought in first. They looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but diminished. The confidence that once fueled their cruelty had evaporated, replaced by exhaustion and fear. Karen's hands shook. Daniel wouldn't meet my eyes. Lily sat beside me, tense but resolute. Mr. Harris spoke first, laying out the terms of the proposed plea deal. Reduced prison time in exchange for full confession, restitution, and cooperation with the investigation. No trials. No public testimony beyond what already existed. When he finished, the room fell silent. Daniel finally looked up. "Mom," he said hoarsely, "please, we never meant for it to go this far." I studied him carefully, the man I had raised, loved, defended, the stranger who had plotted my erasure. "How far did you mean it to go?" I asked quietly. Karen jumped in. "You're exaggerating everything. We were under pressure, money issues, stress." "Stress doesn't make people forge documents. Greed does." Daniel clenched his jaw. "You don't understand what it's like to feel trapped." I almost laughed. "I know exactly what it's like. I lived trapped in your house, under your watch, while you decided when I was useful and when I wasn't." Karen began to cry, loudly, desperately. "We're sorry. We're so sorry." I believed she was sorry. Sorry it failed. I turned to Lily. "Do you want to say anything?" She stood slowly, hands shaking but voice steady. "You told me you'd blame me," she said to her parents. "You said I'd be more believable as the thief." Karen looked away. Daniel swallowed hard. "I recorded everything," Willie continued, "because I realized that if you could do this to Grandma, you'd do it to me too." Silence crushed the room. That was the moment something broke. Daniel's shoulders slumped. "We'll sign," he muttered. "The deal. We'll take it." Mr. Harris nodded, already gathering documents. Before they were let out, Daniel spoke one last time. "Mom, if you ever loved me—" I raised my hand. "I loved the child you were, but I will not sacrifice myself for the man you became." Karen collapsed into sobs as they were escorted away. Lily sat down slowly, breath uneven. "Did I do the right thing?" she asked me quietly. "You did the bravest thing," I replied. "You chose truth over fear." Outside, cameras waited, but we exited through a private corridor. This moment didn't belong to the public. It belonged to healing. That evening, alone in my room, I stared at the city lights and allowed myself to feel something unexpected. Not relief, release. For the first time in decades, no one was watching me, measuring me, planning around me. I was free, not because they were punished, but because I had stopped carrying their weight. But justice wasn't finished yet, because the plea deal was only the beginning, and the sentencing would change everything. As the papers were filed and the deal became irreversible, I realized the final chapter wasn't about what my family had done, but about how the court would decide the value of my stolen years. Sentencing day arrived without ceremony. No crowds, no shouting, no dramatic entrances. Just a quiet courtroom and the slow, deliberate ticking of a clock that sounded far too much like time itself, keeping score. Lily sat beside me again, her posture straighter than it had been weeks ago. She had changed, less hesitant, more present. Trauma either shrinks you or sharpens you. She had sharpened. Daniel and Karen were brought in separately this time. They didn't sit together. That alone told me everything. The judge reviewed the case carefully. Page after page, voice steady and detached. Numbers replaced emotions, dates replaced memories, years replaced excuses. "Mrs. Hale," the judge said at last, "you may address the court if you wish." I stood slowly. This was the moment people imagine as vindication, the speech, the condemnation, the righteous anger. But that wasn't what this moment required. "For a long time," I began, "I thought what was taken from me was money, my home, my autonomy." I paused, letting the room settle. But what was really taken were years. Years of peace, years of trust, years I will never get back. Karen stared at the table. Daniel closed his eyes. "I survived," I continued, Not because I am stronger than anyone else, but because I listened when something inside me said I was in danger. Many people don't get that chance. I turned slightly toward the judge. This case is not rare, it's just rarely seen. Silence followed. Then the judge spoke. He detailed the sentence carefully, measured, thorough, unyielding. Prison time, restitution, mandatory counseling, permanent restraining orders. No theatrics, no mercy masquerading as sympathy. Karen began to sob quietly. Daniel didn't react at all. As the words settled, I felt something lift. Not joy, not triumph, but finality. Outside the courtroom, Lily exhaled deeply. "It's over," she whispered. I shook my head gently. "No, it's finished. There's a difference." That afternoon, we returned to the hotel one last time. Lily packed her things slowly. "Where will you go?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "Anywhere that's honest." I hugged her tightly. That's a good place to start. Later, alone, I sorted through paperwork, new accounts, new documents, new safeguards. A new life built deliberately, brick by brick. No shortcuts, no blind trust. That evening, my phone buzzed with a message from a stranger. "Because of you, I reported my son. Thank you for telling your story." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then another message arrived, and another. I realized then that my story had stopped being mine. It had become a warning, a mirror, a permission slip. I turned off the lights and stood by the window, watching the city glow beneath me. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't done. As I prepared to leave the city behind, one final realization settled in. Surviving wasn't the end of my story, and the last chapter would be written on my own terms. I didn't go back to the old house. That surprised everyone. Friends assumed I'd reclaim it, scrub away the memories, prove something by standing where I'd been betrayed. But healing doesn't require returning to the scene of the crime. Sometimes it requires choosing an entirely different map. I sold it. Every room, every hallway, every shadow that once felt like home and later felt like surveillance. When the papers were signed, I didn't feel sad. I felt light. Lily and I parted ways a week later. She hugged me tightly before getting into her car, her future uncertain, but finally her own. "You saved me," she said. I shook my head. "You saved yourself. I just reminded you it was allowed." She smiled through tears and drove away. I moved somewhere quiet, somewhere no one knew my name, my history, or the headlines that followed it online. A small place with morning light and a view of trees instead of traffic. I bought new furniture, new dishes, new locks. Most importantly, new habits. I stopped apologizing for taking up space, stopped explaining my decisions, stopped mistaking familiarity for safety. People often ask if I regret turning my family in. The answer is no. What I regret is how long I believed love meant endurance. I began speaking quietly at first. Private groups, advocacy circles, rooms full of people who looked like I once did. Alert but unsure, sensing danger but afraid to name it. I never told them what to do. I told them what to notice. Control disguised as concern, urgency framed as love, silence demanded in the name of peace. I watched recognition flicker across faces again and again. That flicker mattered. One afternoon, I received a letter forwarded from my lawyer. No return address, just a single sentence written carefully, almost formally. "I didn't know I could say no until I heard you say it." I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. Not as evidence, but as proof. The court had given me justice, but this was something else. This was reclamation. Some nights I still wake up too early. The echoes don't vanish just because the threat is gone. Trauma is stubborn that way. But when that happens, I make tea, sit by the window, and remind myself of something crucial. They don't get any more of me. Not my fear, not my time, not my silence. I didn't win because they lost. I won because I chose myself, fully, finally, without permission. The world didn't end when I walked away from my family. It expanded. And in that expansion, I found something I hadn't realized I'd been missing all along. Peace without conditions, trust without fear, a life that belongs to me. And if you're reading this, wondering whether it's too late to listen to that quiet warning inside you, let me tell you this. The moment you do, everything you thought was lost becomes possible again.